was thinking about that. That hopes and dreams. Let's go back. Let's look back in order to look forward. The first Europeans to visit here were Spanish. And DeSoto comes through in a really horrible episode for this area in 1540. But in the 1560s, a fellow comes not with the role to conquer, but to find a land route that makes the Spanish less vulnerable in the Caribbean. And so he was to find a land route he was in South Carolina, but he ended up coming through here. And they come in, they end up staying over at Kodak on an island that's now under Douglas Lake. Zimmerman Island is what was called in recent times. They stayed there for a while, and then they're following roads that are already established, paths. They go into Sevierville, toward Pigeon Forge. They make a critical error. They turn up Walden's Creek. They miss Dollywood. So, I think it was poor signage. I don't know. Anyway, they don't see Dollywood. It was called Silver Dollar City back then anyway. So they go along Chilhowie Mountain, and they get across the Little Tennessee, and they're warned that they're going to be massacred because there's still the lingering memory of DeSoto. So they come on the west side of that and kind of come back through Maryville, almost Knoxville, back to Zimmerman Island. And the expedition of 150 men basically disintegrates because Pardo's going to take them back home, back through the mountains, back. And he only gets out of here, out of the 150 men, he only gets back with about 50. And the rest stay here. They just, 2 go off one night, 3 get up early and leave the next morning and just melt away. And you read the journals, and they call this area 2 things. Andalusia, it's like Andalusia, which is where they were all from. This company had been recruited in Andalusia in Spain. So do you hear what they're saying? This place is like home. The other thing they call it is the land of the angels. I mean, that's the phrasing that they use. So they're saying this place is heaven. So they don't leave. So you get Melungeons, you get stories about the Melungeon group, which is a whole other Appalachian story we could talk about. But the DNA evidence is that group has Mediterranean roots somehow. Well, see, one of the explanations of that is Pardo's guys that hung around and married in with the natives here. So that thought, these first Europeans, I've always heard the saying, and I saved this for last, that's why I didn't say it up in the saying part, is that when somebody from around here dies, it's a good 2 weeks before they realize it, that they're in heaven, because it's so much like home. And I think there is a part of culture here that has a very strong feeling of home. And that even when people move away, there was a migration to Detroit and in the auto industry to get jobs and money. And you really had these a lot of my friends, my granddaddy grew up, born here, grew up in Michigan. But the friend that's telling me the story grew up here. In other words, there was this coming back home that's a part of it. And so I think a part of Appalachia is a very strong sense of home, that this is home. And see, we have that independence, but we also have that sense of community, of home. So it's almost a paradox of why, this fierce independence, but by dingies, you're not going to mess with him because he's my neighbor. So there's a connection to it too. And I would argue that that's some of what people come looking for on vacation. And that's why you see them wander through the Smokies and go to an old home site or something. And they want to see a black bear, but there's the largest collection of log buildings in the entire national park system is in the Smokies. So there's that sense of preserving. And the Cherokee have done a good job also on the North Carolina side of the mountain of preserving that sense of home in the mountains. And you think, that's a very strong part of that story of not wanting to leave home. So much so that you hid out in the mountains until kind of the coast was clear, and then you could establish it. So it's not just a European thing. There's a very strong sense of place here. So I think some of the hope is that it's a good home, that we try to look after our neighbors. Now Jesus, tries to push us to help broaden our sense of who our neighbors really are. And that's not a bad message for Appalachian. We could use that to get that expansion of what the neighborhood is and who is our neighbor now. So I think that's where I would end thoughts of that. I think if you really listen to me talk, I've had other opportunities in my life to get to go do things other places, and always made the decision to stay here. I've gotten to do lots of different things, so I haven't done just one thing. I've gotten to do some really cool kinds of things. One of my friends says that's because I just can't keep a job. So there might be that. Another friend says that he and I are best friends because he's an anesthetist and I am a preacher, and so we're bound by a common calling. And some people get that, some people don't. But I think it's a hilarious thing that probably has some truth in it. And so this has been home for me. My ancestors. I know of one part that lived over in western North Carolina in Clyde, which is near Waynesville. My ancestors from the Cumberland Plateau are French Huguenot. So, there's this Scotch part, and then other ancestors that are Scots. So you look at my family tree and it's just like what Appalachian family tree looks like. But Appalachia has a diversity to it. In coal mining areas, you had Irish, you had African Americans, you had Germans, you had Eastern European that mixed in. So in those areas, you had strong Catholic influences that were not like the Protestant influences in other parts of Appalachia. And sometimes we forget about that it's not as homogenous of a culture as we'd like to think it is. It's, to use an Appalachian image, just this wonderful patchwork quilt that has been, hooked together. And and the art of it is that the thread is the land that hooks all of these pieces of humanity together, in this place. But it has been a poorly understood place. Horace Keppert, and he was a librarian in St. Louis, had a real struggle with alcoholism, and basically had to find somewhere to get that off his back. And he wanted to find a wild place. And this is in the 1900, 1902. he said that in the library, he could find more information about Timbuktu and Kathmandu than he could find about the Smokies. So it was, even that late, it was a very unknown, area. And so Keppert moved here and called it the Back of Beyond, but not in an insulting way. I mean, he saw, and he would have argued that that was part of what saved him. Now, he also discovered that they made whiskey here too. So he didn't shake it completely, but still, the point being that he found some kind of salvation in his life, but it was by coming to an isolated place. It's not that people here were backwards. They just didn't, why leave heaven?